Imagine this. You wake up in the morning, turn on the light, and you can actually hear your electricity meter whirring from the bedroom. You walk to the kitchen, start the coffee maker, and your smartphone sends a notification. Electricity prices have increased by 20% overnight. You think it's a glitch in the app, but it's not. This is the new reality. A reality where cheap gas from Texas no longer flows like a river, and energy prices are soaring like a rocket. Sounds like science fiction. What if I told you this fiction could become reality within the next 10 to 15 years? Today, we're talking about what happens when the thing that changed the entire energy world comes to an end. The shale revolution. You've surely heard this phrase, maybe more than once. But have you ever thought about what's behind it? And most importantly, what will happen when it all ends? Because, my friends, all good things must come to an end. And the shale revolution is no exception. Let's start with a simple fact. In the early 2000s, America imported gas. A lot of gas. The country depended on supplies from other nations, and it was a problem. And then a miracle happened. Hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling technologies unlocked access to vast gas reserves previously considered unreachable. Shale gas flooded the market. Prices plummeted. America transformed from an importer to an exporter. The whole world was stunned. It was a real revolution. But here's a question few dare to ask out loud. What if this revolution is approaching its end? Today, we will break down 3 key aspects of this story. First, what is really happening with shale gas reserves in Texas and other states, and why the numbers we're shown might not be as rosy as they seem. Second, how the end of cheap gas will affect the economy, not only of America, but of the entire world. And third, what this means for each of us, for you, for me, for our children. Because when energy changes, everything changes. Ready? Let's go. Let's start with what the shale revolution really is. Imagine a layered cake. The ground beneath our feet is just like that, only instead of dough and cream, there are rocks and minerals. And deep down, several kilometers deep, there is a layer of shale. Shale is a dense, impermeable rock. And inside this rock, gas is trapped. Millions of years ago, there were organic remains that, under pressure and temperature, turned into gas. But this gas couldn't escape because the shale held it in. Engineers didn't know how to reach this gas before. Conventional drilling didn't help. You drill a well down, hit the shale, and nothing. The gas is there, but it doesn't flow. It's locked in the rock's tiny pores. But then they came up with 2 brilliant solutions. First, horizontal drilling. Instead of drilling only downward, the well goes down and then turns to run horizontally along the shale layer. Imagine you're not poking a pancake with a fork, but slicing it with a knife lengthwise. The contact area with the shale increases dozens of times. And the second solution is hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. A mixture of water, sand, and chemicals is pumped into the well under enormous pressure. This mixture fractures the shale, creating cracks in it. The sand gets stuck in the cracks and prevents them from closing. And now the gas can flow through these artificial fractures into the well and from there to the surface. It's as if you took a hard cheese that doesn't cut well and suddenly found a way to make it crumbly. These 2 technologies together created a revolution. In the 2000s, American companies started mass application of fracking and horizontal drilling, and the result exceeded all expectations. U.S. gas production grew manifold, new fields appeared, the Permian Basin in Texas, the Bakken in North Dakota, the Marcellus in Pennsylvania. Texas became the center of this revolution. If Texas were a separate country, it would rank among the world's top oil and gas producers. Can you imagine the scale? Gas prices fell so much that power plants began massively switching from coal to gas. Why? Because gas became cheaper, cleaner, more convenient. American industry gained a huge advantage. Chemical plants, steel mills, fertilizer producers, they all run on gas, and cheap gas made their products competitive on the global market. America even started exporting liquefied natural gas to Europe and Asia. A country that imported gas 20 years ago was now selling it. It was incredible. But this is where it gets interesting, because behind every miracle, there are numbers. And the numbers of the shale revolution are not as simple as they seem. Let's dig deeper. When you hear about gas reserves, you're told huge numbers, trillions of cubic meters, decades of production. Sounds impressive. But there's a nuance. These numbers are estimates of how much gas can theoretically be extracted. And theory and practice are two very different things. Shale wells don't behave like conventional ones. A conventional gas well can produce gas for decades, slowly declining. A shale well is different. In its first year, it produces a huge volume of gas. This is called the initial production rate. Companies show these numbers to investors and say, "Look how great we are." But in the second year, production plummets, sometimes by 50 to 70%. In the third year, it falls further. And then the well produces less and less until it becomes unprofitable. What does this mean in practice? It means that to maintain the production level, you constantly need to drill new wells, lots of new wells. If you drilled 100 wells last year and they gave you 1,000,000 cubic meters of gas, this year you need to drill another 100 wells just to compensate for the decline in the old ones. And if you want to increase production, you need to drill even more. It's like a treadmill you can't get off. You're running as fast as you can just to stay in place. And here we come to the first problem. Drilling costs money. A lot of money. One shale well can cost from $5 to $10 million. Multiply that by the hundreds and thousands of wells needed every year. The investments are gigantic. And here, the interesting math begins. When gas prices were high, these investments paid off. But gas prices are low. Because there's a lot of gas, and if there's a lot of gas, why pay a high price for it? But if prices are low, it's hard for companies to recoup drilling costs. See the vicious circle? Many shale companies have been operating at a loss in recent years. They took out loans, attracted investors, drilled wells, sold gas, and couldn't cover their expenses. Why did they continue? Because they hoped prices would rise, or that they would find more efficient technologies, or that competitors would go bankrupt first. But sooner or later, this game ends. And we are already seeing the first signs. In the last couple of years, the number of active drilling rigs in the U.S. has started to decline. Not sharply, but declining. Companies have become more cautious. They drill where they know for sure there is good gas. They avoid risky projects. This is reasonable from a business standpoint. But what does this mean for overall production? It means production growth is slowing down. And in some regions, production has already started to fall. Let's take a specific example. The Bakken in North Dakota. Just 10 years ago, it was one of the hottest spots of the shale revolution. Drilling rigs stood one next to the other. Towns grew like mushrooms. People moved there for work because they paid huge money. And now, the number of rigs has decreased. Production has fallen. Some towns that grew during the shale boom are now emptying. People are leaving. This doesn't mean the Bakken is dead. They still produce gas and oil there. But the golden years are over. The sweet spots have already been drilled. And here we come to the key point. Shale fields are not homogeneous. In every basin, there are so-called sweet spots. Areas where gas concentration is higher, shale quality is better, wells yield the most. Companies start with these places. It's logical. Why drill where it's worse when you can drill where it's better? But sweet spots are limited. They aren't infinite. And as they are depleted, companies have to move to less productive areas. This means each new well, on average, yields less gas than the previous one. The law of diminishing returns in action. In the Permian Basin in Texas, which is now the main driver of American production, this trend is already noticeable. The best spots are already staked and drilled. Companies are moving to the periphery, where results are more modest. This isn't a catastrophe. Production there will continue for years. But endless growth is not possible. And it's important to understand this. There's another factor rarely discussed openly. Reserve estimates. Remember, I said reserve numbers are estimates? Well, these estimates often turn out to be too optimistic. Companies are interested in showing large reserves. This attracts investors, boosts stock prices, helps get loans. But reality can be different. There have been cases where companies revised their estimates downward after they started actually drilling and saw less gas than expected. And another point, shale gas extraction requires enormous volumes of water. One fracking operation needs millions of liters of water. Where does this water come from? From rivers, from underground aquifers. And what's been happening in Texas and other states in recent years? Droughts. More frequent and prolonged droughts, water is becoming a scarce resource. And if before, companies could take water almost for free, now there are restrictions, prices are rising, conflicts with farmers and local communities who also need water are emerging. This is another factor that complicates and increases the cost of extraction. So what do we have? We have a situation where the shale revolution, which seemed endless, is starting to hit physical and economic limits. Reserves are not infinite. The best fields are already being developed. Costs are rising. Production per well is falling. Water is getting more expensive. Gas prices don't cover all expenses. And all this means one thing. The era of super cheap gas is coming to an end. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in a year, but the process is underway, and it will have consequences. If you're finding this deep dive into our energy future insightful, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that explains the forces shaping our world. Now let's talk about what will happen when gas prices start to rise. Because they will start to rise, it's inevitable. When supply shrinks or stops growing and demand remains high or grows, prices go up. This is basic economics, and the consequences will be felt everywhere. Let's start with electricity. In the U.S., a huge share of electricity is produced at gas-fired power plants, more than a third of the country's total electricity. If the gas price rises, the electricity price rises. It's a direct correlation. Power plants can't operate at a loss, so they pass the cost increase on to consumers, that is, to us. Electricity bills will go up. You might say, so what? We'll pay a bit more. But let's look at the scale. The average American family spends about $100 a month on electricity. If prices rise by 20%, that's another $20. Over a year, more than $200. For one family, it might be unpleasant but tolerable. But when this happens to tens of millions of families simultaneously, the effect is huge. People start saving on other things. They buy less, spend less. The economy slows down. Now, think about industry. Factories, plants, data centers, they all consume enormous amounts of electricity. For them, rising electricity prices are a serious blow to profitability. An aluminum plant, for example, spends up to 40% of its costs on electricity. If the electricity price rises by 20%, its costs increase by 8%. This can turn a profitable operation into a loss-making one. What does the plant do? It either raises prices for its products, or cuts production, or shuts down. All three options are bad for the economy. Or take data centers, huge buildings with thousands of servers. These servers process all our data, YouTube videos, Google searches, Netflix streaming, artificial intelligence. Data centers consume a crazy amount of electricity, and demand for them is growing because we live more and more in a digital world. If electricity gets more expensive, data centers start looking for other locations, maybe in countries where electricity is cheaper. This means an outflow of business, job losses, reduced tax revenues. But electricity is just the beginning. Gas isn't only used for electricity generation, it's used for heating. Almost half of American homes are heated with gas. Winter, it's cold, you turn on the heat, the gas meter spins. If gas gets more expensive, heating bills soar. And this is no small thing. In northern states in winter, the heating bill can be several $100s a month. If that doubles, it becomes a serious problem for many families. Choosing between heat and food is not an exaggeration. It's a reality for millions of people. What about industry that uses gas as a raw material? The chemical industry, fertilizer production, plastics, methanol, all are tied to gas. Gas doesn't just provide energy for these productions, it is the raw material itself. Ammonia is made from methane. Fertilizers are made from ammonia. If gas gets more expensive, fertilizers get more expensive. And if fertilizers get more expensive, food gets more expensive. Because farmers use fertilizers, and if they become more expensive, farmers either raise prices for their products or plant less. Both lead to rising food prices. See how one thing leads to another. Expensive gas leads to expensive electricity. Expensive electricity leads to expensive production. Expensive gas leads to expensive fertilizers. Expensive fertilizers lead to expensive food. Everything is connected. And when this cascade starts, it's hard to stop. Let's look at a concrete example from the past. Winter of 2021, Texas. Temperatures dropped to record lows. The cold was so severe that gas pipelines froze. Gas supplies were reduced. Gas power plants couldn't operate. The state's energy grid collapsed. Millions of people were left without electricity and heating. In the dead of winter, people sat in darkness. In the cold, there was no water because the plumbing froze too. Dozens of people died. Electricity bills for those on variable rates skyrocketed to tens of thousands of dollars. In a few days, it was a collapse. There were many reasons. Texas's energy grid is isolated from the rest of the country, so they couldn't get help from outside. The infrastructure wasn't ready for such cold. But one of the key reasons was dependence on gas. When the gas stopped, everything collapsed. And this happened in the state that is the center of gas production. In Texas. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. This crisis showed how fragile a system can be when it's tied to a single energy source. And if gas prices rise gradually, that's one thing. But if there's a sudden shortage, the consequences can be catastrophic. And the likelihood of a shortage increases if production can't keep up with demand. Now, let's look beyond America. The U.S. is the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, especially after Europe rejected Russian gas. European countries buy American gas in huge volumes. This gave the U.S. geopolitical influence and brought in enormous money. But what happens if American gas becomes scarce? If prices inside the U.S. rise, companies will sell gas domestically rather than shipping it overseas. Exports will shrink. Europe will face a shortage again. Prices in Europe will soar. European industry, already suffering from high energy prices, will be hit even harder. Or Asia, Japan, South Korea, China. They also buy American gas. If it becomes scarcer, they will compete for the remainder. Prices on the global market will rise. This will affect everyone. High energy prices hinder economic growth. Countries dependent on gas imports will find themselves in a vulnerable position. New conflicts and tensions will arise. Energy has always been a matter of not just economics, but also politics. And when energy becomes scarcer, politics becomes tougher. What about alternatives? You might say, okay, gas will become scarcer and more expensive, but there are renewable energy sources, sun, wind. They are getting cheaper. Why not just switch to them? And you'd be right. Renewable sources are the future, but transitioning to them takes time and investment, huge investments. Solar panels and wind turbines are good, but they are unstable. The sun doesn't always shine. The wind doesn't always blow. We need energy storage systems, batteries, large, powerful batteries that can store energy produced during the day and release it at night, or store energy from wind and release it on calm days. Storage technologies are developing, but they are still expensive and not scaled up enough to completely replace gas. Furthermore, new infrastructure is needed. Power lines, substations, smart grids that can balance supply and demand in real time. All this takes years to build and costs trillions of dollars. And even if we start right now, a full transition will take decades. What do we do in the meantime? Gas is still needed as a transition fuel. But if it becomes scarcer and more expensive, the transition becomes more complicated. There's another aspect. Coal. Yes, good old coal. When gas was cheap, power plants massively switched from coal to gas. Coal is dirtier, it produces more emissions, but it's cheaper to store and it's always available. If gas becomes more expensive, it becomes economically viable to use coal again. And we've already seen this in some countries. When gas prices soared in Europe after the conflict with Russia began, some countries returned to coal. This is a step backward in terms of climate, but economically it was necessary to avoid leaving people without electricity. So the situation is complex. The end of cheap gas doesn't mean an immediate transition to clean energy. It could mean a return to dirty energy, at least temporarily. It means rising prices for everything. It means economic hardship for millions of people. And it means geopolitical instability. It's not an apocalypse-style catastrophe, but these are serious challenges that will require adaptation. Companies are already starting to adapt. Some shale companies are merging to reduce costs. Others are investing in new technologies that make extraction more efficient. Others are diversifying, moving into renewable energy. This is a natural process. When a business model stops working, the business either changes or dies. Governments are also responding. Incentives for renewable energy development are being introduced. New nuclear reactors that can provide stable energy without emissions are being built. Energy security strategies are being developed. But all this takes time. And during the transition period, there will be difficulties. For ordinary people, for you and me, this means we need to prepare for higher energy prices. Maybe it makes sense to invest in energy efficiency. Insulate your house to spend less on heating. Install solar panels if possible. Buy an electric car that doesn't depend on gasoline. This is not only saving money but also reducing dependence on energy price fluctuations. For business, this means revising strategies, perhaps moving production to regions with cheaper energy, or investing in their own generation to not depend on external suppliers, or developing products that require less energy to produce. Adaptation is the key to survival. Enjoying this realistic look at our energy future? Your support means everything. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. And we come to the final part of our conversation. What does all this mean for us personally? How will the end of the shale revolution change our lives? And what can we do to be ready for these changes? Let's start with the most obvious: our wallets. High energy prices are a direct hit to the family budget. Electricity, heating, gasoline, all of this will become more expensive. For an average income family, this might mean having to review their expenses, fewer entertainments, fewer trips, more economizing. For poor families, it can become critical. When a person is already barely making ends meet, rising energy prices can push them into debt or poverty. But it's not just about money. It's also about quality of life. Imagine having to heat your house less in winter because the bills are too high. Sitting in a sweater, wrapped in a blanket, it's discomfort, it's stress, it affects health, especially for the elderly and children. Or, in summer, not turning on the air conditioning when the heat is unbearable because you're afraid of the electricity bill. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a decrease in quality of life. Now, think broader. High energy prices affect not only the home, but everything else. Transport. If gasoline gets more expensive, and it does because gas is used in fuel production and as an alternative to gasoline, driving becomes more expensive. Commuting to work, taking kids to school, going to the store, all of this costs more. People start driving less. This affects social life, opportunities. Maybe you wanted to visit relatives in another city, but gasoline is expensive, and you postpone the trip. A small thing? Maybe. But there are hundreds of such small things, and together they form a big picture. Food. We already talked about expensive gas leading to expensive fertilizers, and expensive fertilizers leading to expensive food. But there's another level. Food transportation. The trucks that bring food from the farm to the store run on fuel. If fuel is expensive, transportation is expensive. This is also factored into the price. As a result, supermarket prices rise. And this isn't 1 or 2%. When the cascade effect starts, prices can rise by tens of percent. For a family that spends $500 a month on food, a 20% increase is another $100. Per year, $1,200. That's serious money. But let's look deeper. What happens in society when prices rise and incomes don't keep up? Inequality grows. The rich can afford to pay more for energy and food. Their standard of living hardly changes. The middle class starts to economize but still holds on. And the poor suffer. They have to choose, pay for heating or buy food, pay the electricity bill or buy medicine. This is not an abstraction. It's a reality for millions of people. And when inequality grows, social tension rises. People get angry. They feel cheated, abandoned. They look for someone to blame. Politicians, corporations, immigrants, anyone can become a scapegoat. Populism, extremism, division in society grow. History shows that economic crises, especially those related to energy and food, often lead to social upheaval. Protests, riots, political instability. We saw this during the oil crises of the 70s. We saw this during food crises in various countries. It can happen again. Now think about the younger generation, those who are now 20, 25, 30 years old. They've already faced a pandemic that turned their lives upside down. Student debts that are suffocating. A housing market where prices are so high that buying a house is almost impossible. uncertainty in the job market. And now, add rising energy prices and everything that comes with it. This is a generation forced to adapt to constant crises. This shapes their worldview, their values, their choices. Many young people are already rejecting the lifestyle that was the norm for their parents. Less consumption, more minimalism. Less driving, more public transport or bicycles. Less meat, more plant-based food. This isn't just about ecology, although that's an important part. It's also about economics. Living simpler, consuming less. It's a way of surviving in a world where everything is getting more expensive. And there is a certain wisdom in this. But there is another side. When young people can't afford what was available to previous generations, a house, a car, a family with children, it affects demographics. The birth rate falls. It's already falling in many developed countries, and a low birth rate leads to an aging population, pressure on pension systems, and economic stagnation. These are long-term consequences we are only beginning to realize. Back to energy. What can be done on a personal level? The first and most important thing is to increase energy efficiency. The house you live in can be an energy sieve. Poor insulation, old windows, inefficient heating, all this leads to huge energy losses. Investments in insulation, new windows, modern equipment pay off. Maybe not immediately, but they do pay off. And the higher energy prices go, the faster they pay off. Solar panels, they used to be expensive and exotic. Now prices have fallen, technologies have improved. If you have a private house and can install panels on the roof, it makes sense. Yes, the initial investment is high, but you produce your own electricity. You are less dependent on the grid, on prices, on outages. Many states have support programs, tax incentives that make this more affordable. If you plan to live in the house for a long time, panels can be a great investment. Electric vehicles. Right now, they are still more expensive than conventional cars, but the gap is narrowing, and they are cheaper to operate. Electricity, even if it becomes more expensive, is still cheaper than gasoline per kilometer. Plus, lower maintenance costs, because an electric car has fewer moving parts. If you plan to change your car in the coming years, it's worth considering an electric option, especially if you can charge at home, maybe from those same solar panels. Lifestyle. Small things that add up to big savings. Turn off the light when you leave a room. Don't leave appliances on standby. They still consume energy. Wash in cold water when possible. Use the dishwasher and washing machine only with full loads. Adjust the thermostat a couple of degrees lower in winter and higher in summer. It seems like a drop in the ocean, but drops add up to streams. And, at the societal level, what can we demand? What can we fight for? First, investment in infrastructure. The old U.S. energy grid was built decades ago. It's not ready for modern challenges. We need smart grids that can integrate renewable sources, store energy, balance load. We need new power lines that can transmit energy from one region to another when necessary. These are huge projects that require state participation and political will. Second, support for renewable energy and storage, tax credits, grants, incentive programs. The faster we transition to clean energy, the less we will depend on gas and its fluctuations. But the transition must be fair. We can't just close gas fields and leave thousands of people without jobs. We need retraining programs, new jobs in the green economy, support for regions that depend on fossil fuels. Third, energy justice. Poor families spend a larger share of their income on energy than the rich. When prices rise, they suffer the most. We need assistance programs, subsidies for home insulation, affordable tariffs for low-income families. Energy is a basic need, like water and food. No one should be cold in winter because they can't pay for heating. Fourth, transparency and honesty. Energy companies and the government must tell the truth about the state of resources, forecasts, risks. People have the right to know what to expect in order to prepare. Too often, we are sold a rosy picture, and then reality turns out to be much harsher. Trust in institutions is important, and it's built on honesty. And finally, international cooperation. Energy is a global problem. Climate change knows no borders. Competition for resources can lead to conflicts, but cooperation can lead to solutions. Technology sharing, joint projects, helping developing countries transition to clean energy. All of this is in everyone's interest. We live on one planet, and our future is shared. Let's stop for a minute and think about the big picture. The shale revolution was a miracle. It gave America energy independence, an economic advantage, geopolitical influence. It created jobs, brought wealth to regions that were depressed. It gave us a decade and a half of cheap energy that fueled economic growth. For that, we can be grateful. But like any miracle, it is not eternal. Geology dictates its rules. Economics dictates its rules. And these rules say that the era of super cheap gas is coming to an end. This is not a catastrophe. It's a natural cycle. Resources deplete, technologies evolve, the economy adapts. Humanity has been through this many times. We transitioned from wood to coal, from coal to oil, from oil to gas, and now we are transitioning to renewable sources. It's evolution. But transitions are never smooth. There are always winners and losers. There are always challenges and difficulties, and our task is to make this transition as fair and as painless as possible. This requires foresight, planning, cooperation. It requires us to look forward, not backward, to invest in the future, not cling to the past. And here's what's important to understand. The future is already arriving. Renewable energy is growing faster than anyone predicted. Batteries are becoming cheaper and more powerful. Electric vehicles are conquering the market. The younger generation thinks differently, values differently, lives differently. Change is happening. The end of the shale revolution is not the end of the world. It's the beginning of a new era. And what this era will be like depends on us. We can meet it with panic and fear, cling to the old, deny the inevitable, blame others. Or we can meet it with understanding and readiness, adapt, invest, cooperate, turn the challenge into an opportunity. History shows that societies that adapt prosper, and those that resist change decline. Texas, the heart of the shale revolution, already understands this. Yes, they produce gas and oil there, and will for a long time. But Texas is also becoming a leader in wind energy. Huge wind farms are growing in the western part of the state. Solar farms are appearing one after another. Energy companies are diversifying. They see which way the wind is blowing, literally and figuratively. And they are adapting. It's smart. It's far-sighted. Each of us at our own level can be part of this transition. You don't have to do something grand. Small steps taken by millions of people add up to big changes. Insulate your house, install panels, buy an electric car, consume less, be more aware. Vote for politicians who understand the challenges and offer solutions. Support companies that act responsibly. Educate children so they grow up understanding that resources are limited and the future is built today. And let's not forget the human side of all this. Behind the production numbers, gas prices, economic forecasts, there are people. People who worked in the shale fields and may now lose their jobs. People who live in small towns that grew during the oil boom and now see their towns emptying. People who invested their savings in shale company stocks and are now losing money. These people are not to blame. They did what seemed right at the time. They deserve respect and support, not contempt. A just transition means we don't leave people behind. We help them find new opportunities, new paths, retraining, support, investments in suffering regions. This is not only a moral duty, it's also a practical necessity. Because if people feel abandoned, they will resist change. They will vote for those who promise to bring back the past, even if it's impossible. And this hinders progress and creates conflicts. So we stand on the threshold of great changes. The shale revolution gave us much, but it cannot last forever. The laws of physics and economics are inexorable. Reserves are limited. Costs are rising. Prices will increase. And this will affect all aspects of our lives, our wallets, our comfort, our economy, our society. But this is not a sentence. It's a challenge we can accept. We have the technology. We have the knowledge. We have the resources. Only one thing is missing: the will to act. The will to make difficult choices, to invest in the long-term future, not chase short-term profit. The will to think about the next generation, not just ourselves. And here, the role of each of us is critically important. Politicians make decisions, but they listen to voters. Companies choose strategies, but they respond to consumers. If we, ordinary people, demand change, it will happen. If we ignore the problem, it will catch up with us. Therefore, I urge you, don't close your eyes. Don't think this is a problem somewhere far away or in the distant future. It is here, It is now. Changes have already begun. Wells are depleting. Costs are rising. Prices are creeping up. This is reality. And it's better to meet it prepared than to be caught off guard. Learn more about energy. Read, watch, understand. Understanding is the first step to action. Talk to your family, your friends. Discuss what can be done. Maybe insulate houses together, getting a bulk discount. Maybe create a cooperative to install solar panels. Maybe organize car sharing to drive personal cars less. Small initiatives, but they create a culture of awareness and action. Vote. Vote for those who understand the energy challenges, who offer real plans, not empty promises, who are ready to invest in infrastructure, in renewables, in a just transition. Your vote matters, especially in local elections where decisions are made about specific projects that affect your life directly. Support companies that act responsibly. Buy from those who invest in sustainability, who reduce emissions, who treat workers and communities fairly. Boycott those who act irresponsibly. Consumer choice is a powerful tool. Companies listen when money talks, educate children. The next generation will live in the world we create. Let them understand the challenges. Let them grow up understanding the value of resources, the importance of sustainability, the need for balance between consumption and preservation. They will be making decisions tomorrow, and the better prepared they are, the better their future and ours will be. And remember, change is not only about difficulties. It's also about opportunities. New technologies create new jobs. New industries are born. Entrepreneurs who see the future create companies that will be leaders tomorrow. Investors who bet on sustainability profit. Communities that adapt prosper. The end of the shale revolution is not the end of energy. It's not a return to the dark ages. It's a transformation. A transition from one era to another, from the era of fossil fuels to the era of renewable sources, from the era of wastefulness to the era of efficiency, from the era of competition for limited resources to the era of cooperation for the common good. Will this transition be easy? No. Will there be difficulties? Yes. Will there be winners and losers? Absolutely. But will it be necessary? Absolutely. Because the alternative is to continue on the old path until we hit a wall. Depleted resources, destroyed nature, unstable climate, conflicts over what's left. That is much worse than the difficulties of transition. So the choice is ours. We can cling to the past and fear the future, or we can accept reality and build anew, a future where energy is clean, affordable, sustainable, where the economy prospers without destroying the planet, where people live dignified lives, not competing for scraps. This is possible. It is achievable, but only if we start acting now. The end of the shale revolution is not a tragedy. It's a milestone. A moment when we look back at the path traveled, thank for what the shale era gave us, and turn to face the future. With understanding, with readiness, with hope. Because the future is not predetermined. We create it with our choices every day. If this conversation about our collective future resonated with you, please show your support with a like. And for more essential insights, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's navigate this changing world together. Thank you for being with me in this long conversation. I know, an hour and a half is a lot. But the topic is worth it. Energy is the foundation of our civilization, and understanding what's happening with energy means understanding what awaits us all. I hope this conversation gave you food for thought. I hope it inspired you to learn more, to do something, to be part of the solution. Share this video with those who might find it useful. Discuss in the comments. Tell me what you think, what you plan to do, what ideas you have. Let's create a conversation that goes beyond one video. Because together we are stronger. Together we can build a better future. And most importantly, don't despair. Yes, there are challenges ahead, but humanity has an amazing ability to adapt, invent, overcome. We've been through ice ages and droughts, wars and pandemics, economic crises and social upheavals. And we are still here. Moreover, we are thriving. Because we know how to learn, change, grow. The end of the shale revolution is not the end of history. It's a new chapter. And what this chapter will be like depends on us, on me, on you, on all of us together. So let's write it with wisdom, with courage, with hope. Let's create a future we can be proud of, a future we leave to our children not with a sense of guilt, but with a sense of duty fulfilled.